evening, everyone. Sincerely apologize for the delay due to some technical issues. We will call this meeting to order. Mrs. Henry, can you take the roll?
Ms. Sonia.
Present.
Ms. Val.
Present.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Cousins. Mr. Davis.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Now please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for
Tonight, the Spirit of Excellence spotlights the class of 2022. The graduating class of 2022 donned their caps and gowns and took the stage last month. This year's class exemplifies not only scholastic excellence, but perseverance and resolve as a class that handled half of their time in high school through a global pandemic. Most of the graduation ceremonies were live streamed and available on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see the excellent work and accomplishments of our seniors, please take a moment to watch some of these inspiring ceremonies, 12 in all. Preliminary data from our college and career readiness team shows that more than 300 of our graduates had earned over $50 million in merit-based scholarships, which was nearly identical to a year ago. Graduates will be continuing their education in 36 states, 3 foreign countries, Ireland, Poland, and Spain, and enlisting in every branch of the military. Additionally, our current data pinpoints 165 locations where our class of 22 graduates have or currently apprenticing, interning, or working. This is just the summary of the scholarships data reported so far. Historically, we'll receive additional reports from our students over the next month, and we'll continue to update this important information throughout the summer. On behalf of the Board of the Education of the City of St. Louis, congratulations to the class of 22 and their families. We wish you all the best in the next chapter of your lives. We now go to approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion for the May 10th, 2022 minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve May 10th, 2022.
Any discussion? Ms. Henry.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins. Yes. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Do we have a motion for the May 24th, 2022 minutes?
I make a motion to approve the May 24th, 22 minutes.
Second.
Ms. Henry.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Dr. Adams.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to indicate that camp is off to a tremendous start. This week marks the second week of the program, and registration is now closed. The number of students that are presently participating is around 3,900 students who are participating in our summer school program. Camp SLPS has attracted media attention for its fresh take on credit recovery, learning loss, and accelerated learning. I'd like to thank Dr. Moody under the leadership of Dr. Smith for her coordination, and the teachers, site leaders, and parents and students who have made Camp SLPS a success. Every Friday, students are participating in field trips, and we are really pleased in the direction that this camp is taking. Secondly, the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis has declared that all St. Louis public schools and offices will be closed on June 20th, 2022 in honor of Juneteenth, a new federal holiday commemorating the emancipation of enslaved people in the United States on June 1865. This year, the holiday falls on a Sunday, so we will be observing the holiday on Monday, June 20th, 2022. I want to thank all of those persons who have obviously made this available for our staff, and so there would not be any activities that would take place in the district summer school alike on Monday of next week. At this point in time, we have 3 presentations. The first presentation will be a Kennard CJA renaming discussion, and so I would like Ms. Tracy Spies to come to the podium at this time. We will kind of do a dual presentation. The board requested that that we look at our policy relative to CJA or Kennard. And so at this point in time, Mrs. Tracy Spikes, who took the leadership of the chair of the committee that the board put in place. I will be giving an update about where we are at this point in time. I'll be covering the policy of what the board approved. So Mrs. Spies, if you could start at this point in time.
Good evening, Dr. Adams and members of Board of Education. My name is Tracy Fantini Spies. It's okay, Dr. Adams, everyone says Spies.
Sorry.
It's all right, everybody does it. And I'm pleased to be here tonight to present to you the findings of the committee to rename Classical Junior Academy, formerly Kennard. So first we'll go through the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about history and background, about the timeline for some things that took place, the policy, the board policy that allowed this committee to be created. We'll talk about the committee, the process, the results, the community input, and then we'll have some time for questions and acknowledgements. So first, to start off, just with a little history and background, this really began around 2014 when parents looked into the namesake of the school, Samuel Kennard. They found that he had been a Confederate lieutenant who served under Nathan Bedford Forrest, who's thought to be the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He was also dedicated to preserving Confederate causes his entire life, and he was one of the founders of the Veiled Prophet Society, which we know excluded Black members until the late 1970s. We realized, of course, that this individual does not reflect the values that we want to pass on to our children. And we began the process of talking about and moving towards thinking about changing the name. That really took off in 2018 when the Equity and Inclusion Committee of the PTO founded the Namesake Project. We held community events throughout the school, and we talked with parents about how to talk with their children about race. We had discussions about renaming Confederate monuments with Dr. David Cunningham from WashU, who's an expert in that. And we held meetings to address the community's concerns because it was not a particularly popular idea to change the name at first. So in order to spark imagination, if you will, because people have a hard time sometimes imagining possibilities, we had a namesake fair to generate some ideas on who we might like to name the school after instead. We had an art and essay contest so the students could learn about the nominees and explore their lives. And we distributed a survey school-wide to parents, students, and teachers and staff. It showed that 70% of parents, students, and staff wanted to change the name, and we held a primary to winnow the names down to 3. Those 3 were Clyde Kennard, Mary Meacham, and Betty Wheeler. In the summer of 2020, the Board of Education approved a new district-wide policy for renaming buildings. And in August of that year, the board approved a motion to rename Kennard Classical Junior Academy to just Classical Junior Academy for the 2021 school year, as we were in the beginning of the pandemic then. And this decision, I believe Dr. Adams said was the culmination of a lot of advocacy by a lot of folks, many parents, teachers, community members, board members, to remove Kennard as the namesake of the school. So just to go through the committee's timeline, in November, the policy was reviewed. In December, the board chose names for the advisory committee. We had, I believe, 4 from the school, 3 or 4 from administration. The board got to choose as well. So we had representation from as many stakeholders as possible. We held our first meeting in January. We were not able to hold another meeting then again till March, where we discussed the survey that we were going to distribute to the community. And just briefly, when we met at first in January, we were in the middle still. We were right in the middle of Omicron. So we were not sure at all what was going to happen. And it seemed like having public meetings where community members can come and speak their piece was not a great idea. So we were looking for alternative ways to involve the community, and we came up with a survey. If it hadn't been a pandemic, we would have done our best to hold those community meetings, because I believe that hearing people's voices is extremely important. So, so we distributed the survey, and then we came together on April 26th to vote. Dr. Adams, do you want to go through the policy?
Yeah, I will quickly walk through the policy. Obviously, the Board of Education chose to initiate a process and create an advisory committee, and obviously that's why we are here tonight. The advisory committee rules were that they would hold 3 community meetings, and you've already heard that because of the pandemic, some of that had to be altered. And the naming renaming process had begun, and they solicited potential names and another to receive feedback on what those names were. The advisory committee was able to recommend a name to the board, and the intent is that at least 3/4 of the advisory committee would recommend that those names to the board, and the advisory committee shall bring forward any recommendations within 6 months of its creation. Obviously, it was put in place in December, and obviously we're within that 6-month time frame. The policy, just so the board is aware, because I know it's been a while since they have looked at it, there is some criteria, quite frankly, and the name must not already be in use by another district, school, or facility. The individual must be deceased for at least 12 months. The individual must have a historical significance. Individual, group, or organization must embody exemplary qualities. And if there's a financial component, but the board has to be aware that the organization must have made a significant contribution, which may include a financial donation to the district, not required, but may. And the first consideration will be given to local persons, and that's a big piece that I think the board needs to consider. But consideration may also be given to state, national, international individuals with it or where appropriate. The last piece of the policy that I just kind of want to cover with the board, because the board will be using the policy to determine what the names may be or could be. It shall designate the superintendent designates to inform the board of any fiscal implications that might be in place. Obviously, after the renaming takes place, we will have to go back and look at letterhead and all of the kinds of things that might need to take place, signs. And so it's important that the board does lean into some kind of decision, hopefully by the end of this month, such that we can look to do what we need to do financially to support if there is going to be a name change. An individual board member or superintendent may submit a name or names for consideration by the advisory committee. Administration did not do that, and or consideration by the board as part of naming or renaming the facility. Basically, we allowed the renaming committee to come up with their own names based upon surveys, based on interviews with students as well. We do have a copy, if the board wants to see it, of all of the comments that came. We have them electronically that I'll forward to the board after this meeting. I was going to print them out for you and give it to you in a book, but you have a stack of stuff on your table. So all of the documents after tonight will be forwarded to the board so that they can look at every single document from students as well as from the 750 or so persons who responded.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. And I guess before we get to the members, I would just say that the committee also discussed and put forward some names that we submitted along with the names that were chosen originally in the CJA survey. Right. So these folks were the members of the committee. I won't read each of their names. But as I said, I believe we had 4 from the school, 4 from the board, and 3 or 4 from administration. To get a good representative representation of stakeholders, rather. Okay. So the process that the committee undertook was to meet and follow the process and the criteria that was in the policy. As I mentioned, we got some of the names from the original survey that was done at the school, and some of the committee members put forth names as well. Those 2 names were Minnie Lydell and Arsenia Williams. So let's see. Really, we wanted to keep this process as simple as we could. The committee considered the results of the survey from the community, as well as the results of a survey that was taken from the students in our final selections. So if we can go on to community input, that survey was shared to make sure we could cast as wide a net as possible and provide opportunity for many communities, as many communities to respond and participate as possible. If we had had a little bit more time, a small budget, and a couple of interns, I could have made sure that this got out citywide, but I wasn't able to do that. We did get over 700 responses though. We will, you'll get those results, I believe Dr. Adams said, and you can see all of the comments and everything everyone had to say. There's a bio sheet coming up where you can look at the nominees. It's notable that we did not include Clyde Kennard because he had no connection to St. Louis. That was a question we were asked frequently by parents and students at CJA. Dr. Jefferson, like I said, created a school-wide survey. We had 745 respondents to the citywide survey and 150 to the students. Finally, committee members took into account all of the input we got. And Dr. Frances Gooden, who was a former SLPS educator and administrator, was a popular write-in vote. So the committee voted to add her to the names that we were voting on. And after the voting was complete, we settled on Marie Frankie Muse Freeman, Mary Meacham, and Betty Wheeler. Many folks had asked if keeping the name Classical Junior Academy as the name or in the name was possible. And so the committee is officially recommending to the board that you keep Classical Junior Academy as part of the new name. So the next slide is an appendix. It's a short, just a short bio and rubric that we use to kind of organize our information about the nominees. And you all have that in front of you where it's a little more readable, I hope. And so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Before we go into questions, I'd just like to make a very brief statement and give some acknowledgements. I would like to acknowledge the following folks who have supported and contributed to this process over the last 5 years. So I would like to thank first all of the parents, teachers, students, and staff of CJA who gave many, many hours of their time to this effort. I would like to thank all of the current and past CJA PTO board members, CJA alumni and community members who advised us and advocated for this change, and all of my fellow advisory committee members who worked on this. I also must thank Dr. Adams and the SLPS administrative staff, and all of you current Board of Education members, especially Ms. Bowell and Ms. Donna Jones, who have heard me for many years come up and talk to you about this particular subject. So I appreciate you both. And I also have to thank past board members. Dr. Joyce Roberts, Tracy Miller, Dorothy Rhodey Collins, Adam Lane, and Susan Jones, because this would not have happened without their support. So I think the social media post that promoted the survey to the public really captured the work of this committee and what it was really about. It simply read, "We need you to help us create our own history." CJA is a public school. Public education is a public good. It belongs to the people of the city of St. Louis, all of us. The vast majority of St. Louis Public Schools buildings were named for white men in a time when their voices were the only ones that mattered. This process provided a small but significant opportunity for all of the people of St. Louis to have a voice in the renaming of this beautiful building. The opportunity is both rare and precious, but we hope it will not stay rare. In the process of researching Samuel Kennard and the history of St. Louis Public Schools for the namesake project, our talented researchers collected a substantial body of information about other schools and their namesakes. It's our hope that this information and process can be used to re-examine the namesakes of other schools and whether those individuals' lives align with the values we wish to promote in our scholars today. Finally, I would ask Dr. Adams and the board to ensure that once the name of the building is changed, a plaque or some other marker be placed at the school to tell the story of the original name and why it was changed. We parents and kids are really only part of the school community for a very short while. If we were to skip this step, the history is likely to be forgotten. And the name change may be thought of as simply erasure. We'd miss a critical opportunity to educate our scholars and educate the public, and perhaps inspire future scholars to engage in the work of making change. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, thank you for your service. Questions?
Does the board have any questions? Obviously, the board is going to get the entire packet over the next 1 or 2 days, and you could examine everything, but this was to give you some idea in the public about where we were. We're about a month behind, but the intent was to try to get back to you in April, but obviously the pandemic delayed that taking place.
I just want to say thank you for your work on this. I know that it's been a long process and a long project for you. So thank you. And I'm glad to see it has made it this far and this close to the finish line.
Well, thank you very much.
I would echo that, Tracy. You've put a lot of work into this. It's not always been easy, and it could have very easily been forgotten. And you and a couple of your friends pushed this forward. I remember 2014, I think my daughter was in pre-K. She's now going into 7th grade. So this has been a long time. So congratulations to you for your determination and all the hard work and dedication you put into this. It's really something great to see when the parents and the students and the faculty come and have very difficult conversations and really come out with a good outcome. So thanks.
Thank you.
Again, I want to say thank you as well. Obviously, we're close to the finish line, but on the 28th, the hope and belief is that the board will vote on that night, and we will have a name that the public can be proud of, and obviously the parents and students as well. Like the board, I just want to say thank you. Obviously, we had an initial conversation 7 years ago as we were moving very slow in this process from the parents' perspective, but obviously we're glad to be at this point, and I'm glad to still be around while that's still taking place. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, and thank you all.
Thank you. The next presentation. Thank you. Next presentation will be Dr. Brown. This is a student support services update. We delayed it from 2 meetings ago. Obviously, we want to get the final data from the end of the year. So Dr. Brown.
Good evening. Sorry about that. Good evening. Just want to have this update for student support services. Our goal really is just to remove barriers from students and families to provide resources that will assist with their academic success. A lot of what we do is really just moving barriers to make sure that students are ready to go academically. You need another. The departments that fall under student support service are family and community engagement, social workers, health services, students in transition, after school, and the full service program. I also will go into a little bit about the 22-23 programming. Family community specialists, we have 55 in the district. They service our non-title schools. They work with our families in the community within those schools. We also have 2 parent and student specialists who work here in central office, take a lot of calls from parents, parent concerns, mediate those concerns with their parents and those principals. Some of those I sit in on, especially if they go to the superintendent or the board, then I will mediate those with those parents. The next slide talks a little bit about just some of the activities that go on with the family community engagement. Look at some of those activities. Those include like muffins with mom, donuts with dads, and those types of things. The family attendance calls, students, we make sure we call students who are absent, usually within the first hour of the school day. So a lot of those, what you see are those calls. Also the home visits, FCS makes home visits along with some of the other people within the department. The next slide shows what we do with our students. So we have clothing closets in every elementary school within the district except 2. And those closets contain a lot of uniforms, hygiene kits, not only just uniforms, but other clothing items, socks and those things for our students, where they're able to pick up those things during the school day. During the pandemic, we were able to, what we have is what we call the drive-up delivery, where parents were able to fill out a form. They were able to come in and pick up those items. So this is really huge for us as we talk about servicing our community, making sure that our students have what they need to start the school year. You see those organizations, the National Council of Jewish Women, the Assistance League, and the Little Bit Foundation. Social workers, we have 40 social workers throughout the district and 5 therapists. The next slide is really, really important to us. Our suicide risk assessments have jumped a little bit of course, during the pandemic. You can see the numbers there. Also the harm to others. And I'll talk a little bit about suicide awareness as we move throughout the program. The next slide looks social workers, some of the work social workers do, some of the numbers are there for you to see. The health services, we have nurse allocations for every school in the district, though we know we have a nurse shortage here in the district as well as around the country. But we're really working to fill those vacancies as we speak, starting tomorrow. So the health services, a lot with immunization and those things like that. Thank you. The next slide shows a lot of things that take place within the nurse immunization, physicals, dental exams, hearing exams, eyeglasses are provided. Every school in the district, every student in the district have access to these items. So with different partners like Healthy Kids Express, BJC, and those types of individuals, those types of vendors, we have medical, dental, as you can see, hearing, eye exams, all of those are within every school within our district. The nurses usually set up what they call the vans. The vans will come to the schools. They will they will come in and service those students with the parents' permission. We must have parent permission in those. A lot of what we did in health services the last 2 years, if you can imagine, we kind of really shut down the office a lot to just deal with the pandemic. We had to deal with the basic needs of our students and staff. We had to come up with the reopening plans. We met with the CDC. We talked to the health department pretty much daily throughout the pandemic to make sure that we were in compliance with what was going on at the time. The next slide shows the vaccination events that we held within the district. We test approximately 4,000 individuals throughout the pandemic. I mean, not test, I apologize. We provided vaccinations for those. A lot of those were first and second shots. We also made it that we kind of adapted to one point we had to do 12 and over, and we had to do the different age brackets. So as you can see there, we did about 4,000 vaccinations. What we're really proud of is on the right-hand side, we're one of the few districts that did antigen testing within the school. We had 23 sites that did antigen testing throughout the pandemic. As you can see there were negative students, there were 611. So that means there were 611 students that we were able to keep in school and save school days. As you know, during the height of the pandemic, it took 2, 3, sometimes 4 days to even get a test. And so this was very important for us to make sure that we save school days. So if you take 611 times 3, that's about 1,800 days we saved within the school. But as well as our staff, 569 staff members tested negative through this time, which means they were able to remain at school and not be out of school during that time. So we did a pretty good job. The nursing department did a pretty good job of protecting school days for those individuals. Students in transition, as you see the numbers there, one of the things we're really working on, we do a great job of being reactive. I think our department, Ms. Thomas Murray, does a great job. We had a situation today with a student, but we want to learn to be more proactive. So we're going to start doing things like certain individuals will be assigned to schools, they will be assigned to shelters, so that they're meeting with those individuals monthly to make sure that we are being proactive with our students who are in transition. The next slide is the after-school programs. As you can see there, the list of all the schools that have the after-school programs. One of the things to note on the next slide is the numbers. As you can see there, we added after-school programs to almost 1,500 students this year using ESSA funds, which was very important to support our parents as they regroup from the pandemic. A lot of them had to go back to work. So using ESSA funds, we were able to add 1,500 slots. Our partners through Arches and the YMCA, they do a great job, but sometimes the capacity is a lot. So we were able to add 1,500 spots. We're in the process now of trying to really see how we can sustain this to make sure that those parents are covered during that time. The next slide is the full service programs. So we have full service programs at 4 schools, Walbridge, Oak Hill, Yateman, and Vashon. And so those are the schools that we have our full service programs. The first slide the first chart on the left is really just our stranded student program. So we must make sure that when students are not captured, once they exit the bus, that we have a place for them to go. And so we use Walbridge and Oak Hill for those. One of the things we're really proud of, it's kind of ironic, is that our mobile marts, we actually started our mobile marts in October of 2019, which was before the pandemic. So we started what we call our mobile marts at Walbridge and Oak Hill in October 2019. As you can see there, we fed approximately about 1,900 families during that time, and this was prior to the pandemic. As you can see, during the pandemic, it was heightened, where we were providing meals during this time at our 4 full service schools, which we're still providing at this time. As you can see the 21, 22 numbers. One of the things we are looking to expand our full service program, but that's something we're really working on, but funding will be the optical thing there. The next is the 22-23 program. So one of the programs that we are bringing next year that will be new, I think it was approved last board meeting, was telehealth. Every student within our district will have access to telehealth, medical. Let me make sure I present medical. We will look to do the mental piece later, but right now we're making sure that we have up and running the telehealth program, where on the other end, students will see a live pediatrician with their parents' permission. At this time, Ms. Van Noy and her team doing a great job of working with the company to make sure we have everything up and running. We're trying to have everything up and running after the holiday, which will be that first Tuesday after Labor Day. The second thing is we're district curriculum, SEL curriculum. Last couple of years, we pilot an SEL curriculum. Next year we will have a K-12 curriculum for SEL. Will be implemented by the counselors throughout the district. And so that will begin somewhere around after the Labor Day holiday as well. We also bring in next year, an SEL platform. And this platform is a weekly check-in with our students. And it's new to the district as well. And it's kind of a check-in with students once a week to kind of get the mood, the feeling of what's going on with our students. But it will give real-time information to the principal as well as the network superintendent of the mood of the school, what's going on. It would also red flag, as Ms. Van Noy does now, any serious issues that may be going on with that particular student. And we'll be able to make sure that we monitor that. This SEL platform can drive the SEL curriculum. Mental health awareness. I've spoken with Ms. Willis. We're really going to push mental health awareness starting in August. We're really going to push this as we move through. I had a chance to meet with a group of students across the district, myself personally. With them, I was just pretty much by myself, meeting with a group of students across the district. Then I met with a group of principals. I met with a group of social workers and counselors to kind of help them drive what mental health awareness looks like as we start the school year. And so with that, we came up with a few things that they wanted to do that we're going to start off with. One of the first things we're going to do, everything will start with suicide awareness. I think we have a superintendent's advisory council. I remember meeting with them. We asked a question, how many students in here have had, a friend talk about suicide? Pretty much everyone raised their hand. The next question we asked, well, what did you do? No one knew what to do. And so we must equip and make sure our students are proactive and know what to do. We're not asking them to be social workers or counselors, but what do you do when your friend talks to you about suicide? What do you do? And so that's one of the things we want to make sure that we have going starting forth in August. One of the things I know we're going to do is we have a flyer that's going in each and every orientation packet, as well as the website. And it has all of the numbers that are needed for our students. We're also looking at creating some backpack tags as well. The new suicide prevention lifeline has changed. It's not a 1-800 number anymore. It's 988. It goes into effect, July 16th of 2022, which is coming up here. So, and one of the new provisions we must have that number on the back of all student IDs. So I've spoken with Ms. Van Noy. We're working through that to make sure that that suicide prevention number is on the back of all school IDs. Peer mediation, where we met with students. One of the students even told us on the panel that they need their own office because they're always solving problems throughout the school. And believe it or not, the principal agreed, but didn't want to give the kid the office. But so we have to train them on how to really work with their peers. Instead of, one of the things they talked about is sometimes they don't want to talk to us as adults. They feel comfortable talking to each other. We have some really brilliant students in our schools. I can name two off my head at Sumner and Central VPA, where the principals will tell you those kids solve a lot of problems within their school. So we must provide as students support services. I want to provide them with the training to make sure they have peer mediation in some of those schools. We also came up with pilot groups. There are 3 groups we're going to pilot across the district. With the suicide awareness, it's going to be universal, but we're going to hone in kind of tier 2 with suicide at grade levels 5, 7, and 9. And mostly because those are our transition years with our students. So we're really going to hone into that as we start the year. Our girls group, we're really going to have some targeted work with our girls as we move throughout the year, different situations that cause that. And the last group that came out of this was the LGBTQIA+ community, which we're going to have a few schools we pilot and really work with that community. I also had a conversation with Ms. Kelso, who's the head of the PAC. I'm going to meet with them in October to really talk to the parents about how to have those difficult conversations with their kid about suicide, about those kids that are in those protected communities, and making sure that parents are equipped to have those conversations. A lot of what we see a lot of times, parents not accepting, kids rejecting, and we know that students that are in that protected group are 4 times more than likely to commit suicide at a younger age. So we want to make sure that we provide parents as well as kids some of those things. And that's it. Questions? Sorry, I'm a little faster. But questions?
I'm sure the board has some questions to Dr. Brown.
That was a lot of information.
It's a big
Really
department.
good. I mean, I don't hardly know where to start.
No, you're fine.
But I guess one of my first questions would be, when you talked about mental health awareness with our, when it comes to our students, and with all the shootings that have been happening, but not just at school, our kids were being attacked on the street, at home, before they even get to school. So in addition to, I don't know what the number was that you're going to be putting on the back of the IDs. I don't know, are we going to have a conversation with parents and students about our safety program? Because I don't know, when you send your child off to school, you want to know what the safety program is going to be like at their school, and help your child to understand what they can do to protect themselves. Because a lot of our students do have guns, and no one is talking about it, but there are a lot of young people in high school and middle school that carry guns. And so we need to get real about that, and we need to allow our students to have a conversation about guns and weapons and why our students are attacking one another. And I know you talked about mediation, the students feel more comfortable talking with one another. But I guess I'm really, as a person in the community, a grandma, board member, person in the community, interested in students really talking to one another, because they seem so angry and they're really suicidal right now to me. I'm talking to third graders, first graders, and I'm listening to them talk, and they're worried. They're worried, even though some of them talk to their parents about this. But I guess, well, like I said, it's a lot on here. Wow. I'm really happy that you named so many things, because I don't even know where else to start. But anyway, I know my other board members have something to say, but anyway, thank you.
No, thank you for that. And I did take notes on that safety, and I'll talk to Colonel Davis about that. And we'll see what we can do to really speak to our students about the gun safety, because you're right. I was principal for about 11 years, so I understand students carrying guns and weapons, but making sure that Colonel Davis and I make sure we meet with students and talk to them about gun safety as well.
Right, because I got some emails about not arming teachers in the classroom and that kind of thing. And I know that we have a capable security force that Mr. Davis is in charge of. And
Yes, ma'am.
I just would like to know that we're ramping up our services, and that our teachers and our staff and our students can feel safe when they walk in their school door.
Yes, ma'am.
I have several.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
was pretty quick, but for those that don't know, this is my area. So in regards to the family community engagement, I saw you go over a lot of what they do, and it looks like you're saying you have about 50 housed in the schools, correct?
Yes.
What professional development are we actually providing them? I know you're talking about suicide. It's two parts to what I want to ask in regards to that. Suicide is one, and I'm trying to get where we're looking at percentage wise. Like, why are we not to discredit suicide? Because I know that's the issue, but I'm more so looking at trauma, more so than suicide. Like, how are we gauging and looking at the fact that we want to go with suicide as the top discussion, and how are we providing professional development to the family resource community specialist people?
So good question. So we are, suicide was just huge because of what's going on in the community at one of our local colleges and different things. And that's what the students talked about, but we're still doing the trauma. We're still doing a resilient training for our staff, as well as we're looking to move it to our students. But one of our providers' funding was a little short, but this year we are really looking to do that resilient training with our staff and students as we move forward. But as far as our FCS, you mentioned professional development. We are looking to do more professional development with them around those types of things, especially when it comes to conversating with our parents about the resilience, about the safety, about the trauma and those types of things. So it's kind of twofold, but we are looking to provide different types of professional development for them this August.
So in regards to the suicide, what is our percentage of students that we kind of know that have thoughts of suicide, or You know, like, because I know you were saying you've encountered some, but what is our actual percentage of students?
So I think we have 746 harm to others. There was 625 suicide risk assessments. However, that doesn't account for the ones that we did not catch, because sometimes they will not report, or sometimes we may not see the symptoms, but we did have 625 suicide risk assessments this school year. There was another 121 harm to others. So that's kind of the data we use to drive this.
So who's doing it? Is that an outside entity that's doing the risk assessment, or is that what the social workers are doing?
So the social workers and counselors, they do the suicide risk assessments within our district. So it's in-house.
Okay, and I'm looking at the family community engagement, and for 2019, I'm guessing these were the different type of engagements that was occurring between activities, parental participation, so on and so forth. And it looks like there was a large number in 2021 up under family attendance calls from 29,000 in 2019 to 20 up to 33. How are we, or what are we actually doing with that data? Once we get it, we identify that this is an issue. How are we actually addressing that to meet the needs of the families with this high number?
So with that, those are daily calls. That's why it's a really high number. So that's pretty much every day in the district, every kid that's absent receives a phone call. After, I think, 3 calls, if a kid's absent 3 days in a row, we start making home visits. So that's what we really use the data for, to drive our home visits and more tier 3 type of interaction with those parents and those students.
Okay, so that's I think that's why I'm asking it, because I'm looking at 33,427 calls for family attendance, but the home visits was 225 home visits. So how are we measuring it? What were these calls, or why were the calls so high? I guess is what I'm trying to get an understanding of.
Just attendance. It's our kids who are absent. And so every day a kid's absent. So that's why the number is so high. So if everyone in this room is absent, everyone in this room receives a call that day.
Okay.
And so if it doesn't escalate to 3 days in a row or 5 days in a row, we don't make a home visit.
Okay, so you're saying out of this 33,000, it probably wasn't that much because we only did 225 home visits.
Right. It wasn't that many consecutive days.
3
missed.
days absent.
That's correct.
And who's actually doing the home visits?
It's usually the FCS. Sometimes the social worker goes along with them, but usually the FCS, a lot of times they don't go by themselves. So the social worker will go with them.
Okay. The fly, I'm sorry. Okay, I know you're talking about suicide, and I heard you touch on the LGBTQ community. How do we, are we conducting any surveys? What is our percentage, do we know, of LGBT communities within our district?
So we don't know that because we don't ask that question. That's kind of, they're a protected community as well. So if we ask them that question, we may have to ask every single protected community that question. So we don't ask that question. A lot of what we did was, when I met with students, I talked to students, I talked to staff. Some staff have a high number of that protected community within their school. So that's kind of how we determine to really focus on that group. Plus we have, within that group, we have transgender students who are really young. And so we really want to make sure that we're providing some resources for those students and parents.
Okay, so with that, I think, do we offer what support services or what programs have we put into place for students that fall within that category? If we're not identifying them, like you saying, you don't want to add, I get that part, but how are we actually providing them support services or resources in regards to them dealing with challenged communities?
So to be honest with you, this is the first year that we're going to start really working directly with those communities. Some of the schools have several programs that they may work with, but as a district, this is the first year we will be working with that community. Excuse me.
I know the flies everywhere. How do we track outcomes on the, I know you're talking about the suicide, the assessments, the interventions. How are we attracting the outcomes? Because I'm looking at, again, on the social work services, we have 1,000 in 2019 to 20, you had 1,204, and then it dropped to 664 in 21-22. How are we assessing, like, where are we getting the data from to be able to see the impact and what we're actually doing when it comes to the suicide prevention program? Because it looks like that's what we're trying to lean to go into first. So what's leading to that?
So a lot of trying to make sure that there are no second attempts, or and sometimes what we have is also low, middle, and high. So that means the low, middle, and high risk. The high risk is when you have a plan. So that's the high risk. A lot of times they're low risk. Kids just may mention it. Some of our elementary kids will mention it. And so we try to provide interventions for those students and those parents, but a lot of times they're not repeat. And that's what we will track to make sure that they're not repeating those behaviors.
Okay, and out of all of this, I'm just curious, how does the parental participation look? What is the percentage of a lot of the data that a lot of the information you're providing to us? Where do we see the holes, I guess? Do we see holes when it comes to the parental involvement, or do you see holes in where we're not actually reaching the kids or the population that we should be?
So good question. I think the situation we have a lot of times is the misconception about counseling and therapists when we refer kids out. And so the parent participation comes in because we can't provide any services with our partners, our vendors, without parents signing off on everything. So that's what this new mental health awareness campaign is really about, and talking with the parents to make sure that they are aware of what's going on, so we can get more of them to sign off on what we need to do when it comes to counseling and social workers, which understandable. Sometimes parents don't want that invasive part of their household. And so we just have to make sure that parents are understanding that's not what we're here for. We're trying to make sure that we help the student.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
This is my
You're fine.
area, so you know.
You're fine.
I ask. I'm looking at our physicals. In 2019, we had 279 physicals. In 21-22, we had 62 physicals. I know we were focusing a lot on immunization in regards to COVID. Where and how it just seems, looking at this, that we've kind of strayed away from, I don't want to say quality of life things, but more of the health needs, screening needs, which I think had we focused more on that, we probably would have done a lot better in regards to vaccination for COVID-19 and so on and so forth. So do you think that we did not put as much interest as we could have? Because I'm looking actually in all the different health screening categories, and it looks like all of them have dropped in providing services that I think we really should have been providing to our youth.
Yeah, a lot of them dropped. At the beginning of the year, we were not allowing vendors in our schools. And so that had a lot to do with the numbers dropping, because we did not start allowing vendors into our school until around second quarter, almost second semester. So those numbers dropped because those vendors were not able to come into the school. We had vendors coming into the school as late May because we were behind, because we could not allow them in at the beginning of the year. That's why you see a drop in those numbers, especially, during the pandemic, they couldn't come in. But even at the beginning of the school year, they could not come in to do those physicals, to do those hearing exams, those eye exams, and those types of things. So that was the reason for the drop. You should see it climb next year.
That's right. Okay. And you talked about students in transition and the homelessness. When you're saying we're going to focus more on having someone or individuals assigned to those schools that address the homeless need, what exactly would they be doing assigned in those positions? What would their roles look like?
So what we're going to do next year is when they're assigned to a school, say they're assigned to school X, that person will visit monthly to meet with those students that are in transition, to make sure that they're provided and they're receiving the resources that they need. Sometimes students will not ask, but we want to make sure that we're going out to meet the students in the schools to see what they need. So that's the reason. That's what we mean by being a little bit more proactive. We do a great job of kids need something. Thomas Mary, her crew, they run, walk, crawl, do whatever they can to help students. But what we're going to do next year is be a little bit more proactive by going into the schools and really working with students and checking on those students more often.
So from that, the hope is that we'll get data to show the change and impact that's made.
We hope so, yes.
Okay, two more. The after-school program, looking at these numbers, I want to make sure I understand this. You're saying for 2021-22, the total amount of students that participate in our after-school program is 2,660.
That's correct.
That's a really short number. That's a small number considering where we are. I guess I want to say, if we're looking at crime, trauma, pretty much what Ms. Jones is saying, this makes me want to say, why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we initiating and bringing in the full service program? Is that similar to the CEC program?
Similar, yes.
Okay.
It's different, but I can explain that, but I'll answer your first question.
So how are we trying to target and reach more if we're looking at, which I get, are high schooler and middle school kids, but if I'm looking at our population for K to 5th or 6th grade, 2,000 is a very small number, in my opinion.
So the students, the after-school program is voluntary. So we can't just tell a parent they have to leave their kid there. So it's on a voluntary basis, like I said. And Arches, who funds the after-school program, only has the capacity to take so many. So there was a waiting list before we use ESSA funds to increase. That's why you see the increase of 1478, about 1,500 students, because a lot of those students were on the waiting list because Arches did not have the capacity to accommodate our students. So we did increase it by 1,500 this year. But again, it's on a voluntary basis with the parent to participate in the after-school program.
So what measures are we taking? And I think that's challenging in itself to hear that I get it's a volunteer basis, but then I'm hearing it's a waiting list. So what measures, and I get the ESSERs, but I just don't think that's enough, because if we're dealing with what we're dealing with, not only this pandemic, but we're dealing with trauma, we're dealing with safe, places for our young adults to actually be. I just think that there should be so much more in trying to identify and reach those that seem not to be reached. And it can't just be sending a flyer home or, asking them to, it's how are we really engage in these communities to let them know that the services are actually there.
So the principal did, once we expanded everything, principals did make phone calls to parents in the individual schools to offer the after-school programs. So the principals of each school did make an attempt, but I understand what you're saying, and we'll work to do something see if we can do something a little different to attract more students next school year.
And my last question, looking at the data that you presented in regards to the nurses, you're saying we have 60 nurses.
60 allocations.
60 allocation for
60
nurses.
allocations,
But
one for
where-
each school.
We do have
One for
one.
each, we have an allocation for each school, 2 at one school, which is Gateway Michael.
Okay. But we don't have them filled is what we're saying.
No, we do not.
Okay, we're still
trying to fill positions.
okay. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Well, Ms. Cousins covered a lot, so I'll try to be brief. The family community specialist, you said you had 55. What's the turnover rate for those positions?
The turnover rate is, I can get that for you,
Okay.
the exact turnover rate, but it fluctuates year to year, depending on what's going on. Some of our FCS actually go back to school and become teachers. They become social workers. One of them just became a counselor. So a lot of them will go back to school to work within the district. So they're not leaving the district all the time. They're being promoted within the district, but I can get you the exact numbers from HR.
And I guess I'm asking because it seems like a very important job, and a good FCS is worth their weight in gold. I mean, they probably
Agree.
save kids' lives.
Agree.
And they're also probably the lowest paid people in our district. And I see Ms. Banks over your right shoulder. I'm not going to blame her for that, but I know that
No.
because it's a Title I program, we get Title I money for FCSs, and I know that there was proposed legislation to double, triple that nationwide, and I was always hoping that would pass. But is there any concern that we're underpaying these individuals that are so valuable, so it's hard to retain and attract people? And we have a lot of people that are doing it for the love of the kids, and God bless them, but it'd also be a lot easier if they made a living wage.
Great question. We actually talked about reimagining the position, Mr. Burton and I. And again, that's when pandemic hit. So talk to Ms. Parks and Ms. Irons L. We've had those conversations about reimagining that program. Those positions, so that we can increase the pay, but we would have to increase duties. But a lot of them are doing a lot of the duties that our FCS go beyond the call of duty in a lot of our schools. they're the first people you see when you walk in school sometimes. So yes, we are looking at reimagining that position.
You had mentioned that you have two people at the district office who are
Mhm.
responsible for calls, and I was a little confused about the call volume. But in terms of the calls that they're taking, how many generally do they get a day?
Uh, It varies. I'll be honest with you, it varies the time of the school year. Sometimes as many as 5 or 6. I'm sorry, many as 10, and sometimes maybe 1 or 2, because a lot of times the FCS at the school level will assist with that. A lot of what they see are calls to well, it's only one person now, Ms. Hudson Campbell, but a lot of times those are calls that go to the superintendent. Parents want to talk to the superintendent. They may call and want to talk to the board members. So then I'll step in and have those conversations with those parents to try to resolve those problems. So it just varies throughout the year, especially at the beginning of the year, we get a lot of calls. And then the end of the year, graduation, all those types of things, we get a lot of calls.
The students in transition, just to kind of follow up on what you were discussing about the proactive measures, how many people do you have for to do those proactive measures? And this sounds like it's an added duty. So are you staffed enough in that department? Because I know we have 4,000, 5,000, we always suspect that there's probably more kids since they have to self-identify than we even know. Is that staffed enough to go in and proactively once a month to meet with those students?
At this time, I would always say no. We can always use more staff. But speaking of Thomas Mary, she's covered it for next school year. She just added one more person to her staff, another part-time person. So I'm always in a constant communication with her regarding what she needs as far as that task. That is a daunting task for that department.
And she's superwoman, so it would be hard to keep up.
She's the best person probably in the world for that job.
Regarding the after school, you had mentioned that you're hoping to sustain the portion that is school-based that is done. And is that because you're mostly dedicating ESSER funds at this point?
That's correct.
And are you going to be able to continue that? How long do you project that you'd be able to continue that?
For 2 years.
And it was my understanding that outside the arches and maybe to some extent the YMCA, they had capacity in terms of licensing because they have to be licensed.
That's correct.
But they had staffing issues.
They have a lot of staffing issues. I just talked to the head of Arches last week, met with him. I met with Unleashing Potential, Stray Dogs. I've been meeting with the heads of these groups, and a lot of it is staffing. A lot of it is pay because of what the state gets, how the state funds them. But it's kind of straining on their part. And so really just meeting with them to see how we all can work together to sustain this. And so that's what we're all looking 2 years down the line once all of these funds run out. So we're in the beginning of those conversations with the head of Arches in that group.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that you're going to sort of relook at how you do outreach for these programs, because in my personal experience, they're hard to sign up for. You don't always know, especially with the vendors, what their capacity is. It's not really a professional sign-up process. You kind of have to hear word of mouth, know when to show up. I mean, that's a lot of things that happen in this district that you kind of have to, put together a Rubik's Cube to figure out how it works. And if you're already dealing with people that are single parents that are stressed, they're trying to find childcare, it is a great burden on them. So I think the first question I asked when I came on this board was about aftercare. And every time I see you, I'll ask you about that because it's still not up to par in terms of the communication that we have with parents. And I keep a folder, and I'll bring it for you sometime, about charter school that send me postcards for enrollment. And there's not a single one that doesn't talk about aftercare provided. And so there are ways to do it. And I think that kind of shows how much it is actually valued by the community. So I hope that we can really continue to focus on that. In terms of ESSER funding, so a lot of the ESSER funding is marketed to handle stuff in your department. Are there, and you've kind of mentioned in terms of just the aftercare, but what other programs are you using ESSER funds either this year, or are you forecasting in the future to use ESSER funds to sort of help with the support aspect that we need for our students?
So the SEL curriculum is one we're using ESSER funds for, the SEL platform as well. We're going to be bringing those vendors I talked about for those specific communities. We found out that a couple of weeks ago, the MHB finally make sure that they awarded the funding. So some of them didn't receive as much funding as they have in the past. So we may be using some of those ESSER dollars to support those groups, especially one group that does a lot of our resilient training. They did not receive funding. And so they do resilient training for our safety officers, as well as our counselors, social workers, and FCS. So we're going to be shifting some of those ESSER funds to support those programs that did not receive MHD funding 2 weeks ago.
And in terms of the full service schools, have you maybe had any discussions or considerations of adding schools to that? Because certainly there are more than 4 that would benefit from that program.
Yes, we are. Based on funding, I had a conversation with Ms. Banks this morning regarding full service programs and expanding those programs and using ESSER dollars to really move those forward, making sure that we can sustain those programs. So we are. As a matter of fact, I have one school in mind because we have those 3 schools in North St. Louis, Walbridge, Gateman, and Vashon. I have a school that's in South St. Louis that has about 3 schools within a 5-block radius that I'm really looking to expand to help that community, because a lot of what we do in those food service, not only just feeding the food programs, but we, like at Vashon, they have the CNA program for the adults and different programs like that. So we want to make sure that we kind of start expanding that next year. And I think, Dr. Adams and I had that conversation about really looking to expand those programs.
And just in the interest of time, I have one last question. I probably have 100 more questions, but I'm trying to go fast. In terms of the SEL platform, so that's a vendor that we've used, and I don't know if we voted on or selected. We've got a lot of stuff. Is that something that parents are going to have to opt in for their students' participation?
They do not, but I guess that's a question I would have to. That's a good question, because when we talk to the vendor, we talk to other school districts, they did not have parents opt in. Like I spoke, like Nashville uses this program. They did not have parents opt in. So different school districts did it a different way. That's a conversation I will have with our deputy team as well as Dr. Adams.
We are in Missouri.
Understood. Understood.
All right, thank you.
I do have just a couple of more questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll be real quick about it. I think I have some concerns about the after-school programs and the outside vendors that we currently are utilizing for our programs. How do we develop a historical file on our students when we're using so many outside vendors, so that if we are going to identify students and families who have issues, how do we go back and then address their issues in the long term? Because it's just like spending all this money on all these various outside vendors, but we don't have a file on our students to refer back to. And I think that's my real concern, is that, yeah, you've given them all these services and here's after school program, but who's really documenting these services? Who's going to receive them? And where are the files going to be held? Is it confidential? Is there someone in the district that can go back and periodically look at the file and say, hey, this is Donna Jones and her family needs such and such, and maybe we need to give her a call just to find out what's going on, because we are spending a lot of money on after school programs, summer camps, and a lot of these people are not from the district. And they have access to our students, and they might have identified some issues, like many of the people who have created chaos within schools. They had problems, but no one may have communicated that with people that could have done something about it. So I guess I just want to know who's creating this file.
So good question. So the first part of that is we do not pay for after school, only this year when we started using the ESSER fund. So the after school programs are not paid for by the district. They're through Arches, which is through, they have a grant that they use. And so we do not pay for after school programs. Our after school coordinator, Ms. Judy King, she does the coordination and making sure she's in contact with them and receiving data from those individuals as they move forward.
But where are the files, the information that you collect on the students themselves that participate? Where is the information from the participants? How do you document that? Where's the history? So you'll know who these people are, these students are.
So that comes through Ms. King, and I can research that and make sure I follow up with you on that documentation from those different programs that we have within our school. Because those students, they do have records of those students and what takes place in those after-school programs. So I can follow up with that for you.
Okay. Okay, so I actually work as a mental health advocate. So I have a whole bunch of questions because I do this all day, every day. I don't know, like I know you're giving us a presentation, but I feel like some of this is still so vague to me. You know, like I want people at home watching this and even for us to be very informed on what are the actual tangible outcomes. And I feel like I heard a lot of like, oh, we're piloting this, we're starting this the first, you know, this will be the first year. And I'm glad that we're starting it, but I also feel like the last time that y'all came here, I heard the same thing, like we're piloting this is gonna be our first time doing some things. And then I just had some questions about like some specific things. Okay, so the peer mediation that students do, is it teachers or staff that identify them? Do the students identify themselves? Do they sign up at the beginning of the year? Is it as issues arise? And if they don't have their own space for it, where is it? Is it like a semi-regular basis where all the issues are compiled at each school? Like how's the process?
So this is the first year we're going to start training students. Different schools have individual peer mediation groups that they run as an individual school. This is the first year at the district level. We're going to provide resources to those students to make sure they're being trained properly on peer mediation. So a lot of schools have it individually at their school. And so those principals pretty much run those programs. But we want to provide professional training to them starting next year.
And I also think it would be great to give them some type of recognition or some type of reward at the end of the school year, obviously, for serving in that capacity. And especially like at graduation, if they've served in that, you know, throughout school, getting that would be great. And then I heard you mention girls group, and I guess what types of topics are covered in girls group? And like I heard you say girls group and LGBTQIA. So I guess my thinking is, obviously I think girls groups are good, but why did we choose girls group and not also boys group? I'm just curious about that because I know also a majority Black district, and I know Black boys have lots of issues as well. So I'm curious how we went about identifying that.
So based on, I'll say data, when it comes to our young ladies, is why we chose, or why the students in the group chose to start with the girls. And remember, all these are just pilot. We're starting these programs. So it's based on data.
Yeah, I'm just, you work in this field, boys, males are less likely to be forthcoming, so I'm just curious about that. And especially because of St. Louis and LGBTQI pilot group. So that will just be them voluntarily signing up. Like they'll have to, because I know you said like, oh, we have to be careful how we go about identifying them. So what is that process?
That would be a
for them?
voluntary basis.
So like when all the kids register, they all get asked, or?
At those pilot schools, we have a vendor that will come in as part of the MOU process that's already been approved by one of our vendors. So they'll work through that and they'll provide us guidance, and we'll work through them on how to implement this program within these schools.
Okay, and I know we're talking about just kids, but I've also heard, and maybe some other board members have gotten anything about struggles that LGBTQI staff have as well at their schools, and sometimes even maybe feeling discriminated against by leadership. Are we looking at or exploring anything for supports for them?
No, we had not, but we did for parents, but we can look into staff as well. I will talk to the HR department about that.
Okay. And then what triggers, so I know like mental health assessments, suicide assessments, again, I do those every day. So I'm just curious what an emergency arises, but do we have anything built into their registration process or built into throughout the year at some point, like some type of check-in where, I don't know, like a questionnaire or something that, like, is there any mechanism we have in place to check in with kids, even if we don't get the notification it's emergency? If I'm a student, am I going to at least get one opportunity in my school year to know that these resources and things are here? Is that built into some type of process that we have?
So again, a lot of that is with awareness that we're going to do with the flyers and all those types of things. But at the same time, our social workers in every school, they have what we call small group sessions, as well as our counselors throughout the year. So those are times when they have those conversations with students in those small group settings. And sometimes they have the one-on-one meetings as well.
And then I heard you, I'll be curious on more data on referrals and resources, but I can actually, I can get some of that later.
No problem.
And then on-site critical incident support, or, you know, like Ms. Jones was saying, school shootings, or like a lot of times, you know, we hear all the time, a scholar passed away, different things that happen. Do we have things that, you know, if a student passes away or some type of traumatic incident happens at a school, where that school community is given access to like on-site support or things like that?
So it's one of the things we talk about. We work 24 hours a day. If I get a call from Colonel Davis, we have a specific way of connecting with the police department. We have one contact in the police department. So if something happens on a weekend to one of our students, I will get a call on a Sunday night, Saturday morning, it doesn't matter. And then we immediately trigger our, what we call our crisis team. It's made up of social workers. They will be at the school before the school day starts. They will talk to the principal. They will have small groups, pullouts for kids. If the student has a sibling at another school, we make sure that we go to that school as well to make sure we provide that crisis intervention for those students.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yes.
And then do FCSs, do they get educational support? I know you mentioned like they tend to go back to school. Do we have something in place that incentivizes them to grow as a teacher or a social worker or whatever the capacity may be?
No, I don't think they qualify for what we call our Parson Blewett Fund, which is our certificated staff, but I will look into that for you.
Say that again.
The Parson Blewett funds, which helps our certified staff when they're going back to school.
And they don't qualify because of?
The certificated staff. The fund is for certificated staff.
Okay, it's just an idea, but I know we have something in place for teachers when they're not certified, where we, you know, we encourage them to get certified and we take care of everything. So
yes, that would be an HR. I can
Right.
make sure I talk to Mr. Burton.
Okay, and then I heard you also mention suicidal awareness, and Ms. Tony asked you about trauma. Do we talk to them about sexual assault or sexual traumas? Do we do anything around that?
With our social workers, we do. When, like, again, in those small group settings within the school, our counselors work with them on that. The SL curriculum tackles that a little bit. Also, I think, I'm not sure, I'll have to talk to Dr. Smith Jr., as our health curriculum may tackle a little bit of that as well. But I know our social workers and counselors in their small group settings have those conversations.
Yeah, because I think especially for those girls groups, I hope it's a part of that, because, you know, on average 1 in 3 women deal with sexual assault by the time they're 16. So just a great way to put that into there.
Yes.
And then, okay, I just had a question
fine.
about something you said earlier too. You said that they, in order to increase their pay, they would need to have more duties. Is that like the established criteria? Like, who decided that that's the
it's
case?
just a lot of times when we're creating job descriptions and different things of that nature, we're really, sometimes we do expand duties as we go, because a lot of, like I said, a lot of the duties they're already doing. So it's not really expanding. It's just making sure we're capturing everything that they're doing, because a lot of times they're doing duties now above what I said before, above and beyond. So we want to capture those in the job description. So it's not really adding duties, it's making sure we capture everything that they're doing.
So you're saying that you might update the job description for them basically, and then propose an increase for them?
As we look to reimagine the position based on what other school districts are doing across the country.
Okay. And then, okay, I heard you mention a lot about ESSER funds. Have you, and I know we still have a little bit, but are we having any conversations about more sustainable funds once ESSER runs out?
Yeah, every program that we put in place, we always talk about sustainability. And so those are those conversations of how we sustain them. A lot of that is in the planning, like I said, with Arches, having conversations with those after school programs. So we're in a process of really looking 3 years out once the funds are going to really sustain those programs, all the programs that we have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I can
You're
always,
fine.
I'm gonna reach
That's
out to
fine.
you via email.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta come back.
Mhm.
The ESSER two funds, what piggybacking on what Sonia is saying, I think my fear is if we're looking at 2 years implementing these programs, my hope is, and I want to publicly say it, that after the 2 years, we don't have to shut these programs down. We need to work very sophisticated, diligently to identify how we can sustain these programs there after 2 years. Because I think what we're looking at, when you're looking at your CECs or full service programs, those communities rely solely on those programs. And if we start something, I would hate that we will have to, close it out because of lack of funds. So that's something I think we definitely need to be looking at. The last thing I want to make sure that I'm covering is I've heard a lot about different MOUs that we have with different agencies and organizations. I think one of the problems that I've always had that I've brought to you before when you presented is fidelity. How are we doing the fidelity check to ensure that the people that are providing the services to our kids are doing right by our kids, which I think supports what Ms. Jones is saying. Arches is doing everything that they're doing. They're probably bringing in various resources that they're providing to our kids, but how and what mechanisms are we putting in place to ensure that they're doing right by our kids?
So that's a great question. And I heard you last time when you spoke about that. And I've actually challenged some of our members of our team on the people that are servicing our kids. And so I am looking at a different way, because right now we use their metrics and we present them to you as data. I'm looking at something to use internal, where principals and those students are giving us feedback for those organizations instead of just relying on their feedback. So that's one way we're going to try to change how we look at those organizations coming in, because you're right, I have challenged that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, guys.
Based on the board's questions, it may be beneficial at some point in time, Mr. Davis, is to have a work session, just focus on a specific area, whether it's suicide prevention, because I think these are deep conversations and questions that the board is asking. And so we might take health services, we might take social work services, might take FCS and do a deep dive over a 2-hour period to walk through all of the details around what we're doing in those areas to try to answer all of the questions that the board might have. So I'm going to work with Mr. Davis and Vice President to kind of develop a schedule in this space to try to do that for our work sessions. Last presentation is the school redesign, Dr. Pollack, Dr. Williams, and I think our partner from Washington University.
Good evening to our board, our superintendent, and our community. It's truly an honor and privilege for our team this evening to share some preliminary thoughts from our work this year with the inaugural cohort of the 7 redesign fellows. Before I invite Dr. Isaac Pollack, who is our associate superintendent for innovation, turnaround, and charter partnerships, and our partner in this work, Nikki Dowdy from the Institute for School Partnerships at Washington University. Before I invite them to the podium, I have the honor and privilege to share some thank yous this evening and to extend some heartfelt thank yous to members of our team. So first of all, I'd like to take a moment to just honor and acknowledge our children. We call them scholars here in the St. Louis Public Schools, the teachers, our leaders, the school teams, and the families at the 7 schools involved in this mission critical work. So let me take a moment and recognize and acknowledge Carver, Laclede, Melanphy, Roosevelt, Shenandoah, Vashon, and Woodward. And you'll hear more about their intentional work this evening. I'd like to take a moment to extend a thank you to our partners. I acknowledge Nikki Dowdy, who is here in the audience this evening. She'll present in a while. But I'd like to acknowledge our partners at Washington University for their financial support, their thought partnership, and their unwavering commitment to this work. Dr. Vicky May, Nikki Dowdy, and that team. Additionally, we are very thankful for the financial support from Parsons Blewett Memorial Fund under the inspirational leadership of Dr. Alice Roach. And we deeply appreciate the financial support from the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation under the leadership of Ms. Bridget Jones and continuing under the leadership of Mr. Halliday Douglas. We thank our executive coaches. They worked tirelessly this year, supporting the 7 principals and their school teams. And I do want to thank the design team members. They challenged each leader to dream big, to shift to a growth mindset, and to embrace their strengths. So once again, Nikki Dowdy, Isaac Pollock, Jay Hartman, and Audrey Jackson. A recurring theme of our work this year, and you'll hear about that in our presentation, has been the process is the product. That's no less true for our district team under the leadership of our visionary superintendent and board. The process from this perspective will continue, we'll deepen this process and strengthen this process by bringing our colleagues, our partners in this work at the district level, AFT St. Louis Local 420, our local president, Ray Cummings, and his team to the table, to this mission critical work to strengthen the process and to continue to help us to deepen this thinking about this mission critical work. I'd like to invite Dr. Pollock to the podium. He's going to frame the process this year and frame some of the thinking that took place under the work of our principals, our fellows, and their teams in each of those 7 schools. And then we'll invite Nikki Dowdy to share some inspirational thinking and the design work that took place this year. So we're very, very thankful for the leadership and the support from each of those members that I mentioned and the board and our superintendent. Dr. Pollock? I'll take a moment and wipe this off if you don't mind. I have really bad allergies and I don't want you to be subject to them.
Good evening. Thank you. So, excuse me. We're here tonight to talk about the Redesign Fellowship, which we're really excited about. This was the inaugural launch of it, although we've done similar types of programs like this, which we'll get to in a second. We began by interviewing principals in the spring of 2021. We delayed the launch to December of 2021 as we established our partnerships, got our executive coaches online. There are 7 experienced principal fellows who engaged with us. They are some of our rock stars. There were 14 average years with SLPS, 9 as administrators for each of them on average. They had teaching experience, 7 years on average, and they represented 2,100 students across our district. They made a 3-year commitment. This was the first year. 1 year of planning, as I said, that was delayed, so it will continue through December of 2022, and then 1.5 years of supported implementation and adaptation. You see before you the 7 different fellows. We're really excited about who participated this year. I'd like to highlight the diversity of these of the fellows and the fellowship. So we had 1 magnet school, 1 choice school, and the rest were neighborhood schools. I'm sorry, I can read off the schools. They are Melanphy Botanical Garden Investigative Learning Center, which is the 1 magnet school, George Washington Carver Elementary Academy, which is a choice school, Woodward Elementary School, which is a neighborhood school, Roosevelt High School, and Vashon High Schools, which are 2 comprehensive schools, high schools, Shenandoah Elementary School, which is one of our neighborhood schools, and then Pierre Laclede Elementary School, which is becoming a pre-K through 8. I'd also like to point out that there are 3 of these schools are on the north side and 4 are on the south side, and they represent a diversity of our student population. So as I mentioned, we've done this type of work before. We've had superintendent zones, we've had whole school transformations, we've had retheming, we've had pilot schools, we've had comprehensive schools. And so this is a little bit different in the sense that it's a bet on human-centered design, on this idea of small changes, quick wins, and quick pivots. It's a strategy around leaders and strong leadership of them making decisions for their schools, but working within the system. So we didn't take these schools outside of the usual system. The components of the program includes 8 different intersessions this fall, individual executive coaching, one-to-one support from WashU ISP and from ourselves. We had intentional flexibility discussions with the district leadership, which we talk about a lot in terms of district conditions to allow for innovation, and then providing a stipend for those fellows. The results so far have been a presentation of their prototypes, which they just completed, the design books for what they've their strategies, and which Ms. Dowdy is going to mention in a moment, and then specific action plans of how they're going to implement those in the fall. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Nikki Dowdy with the WashU ISP.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for allowing us to be here. When the SLPS leadership connected with the ISP, there was a really grand vision around the fellowship design process and what they wanted fellows to experience. And we thought it was going to be such a great collaboration because it blends well with our appreciative inquiry work that the ISP does, and also our human-centered design process. For us, what makes appreciative inquiry so transformative is that we look at what's already happening that's successful and strong within a community. And so what we did with our fellows over a few periods, 4 sessions actually total, was to have them go back into their schools and look at what's working. Where are your strengths? What's your assets? What are your assets? Where do you see success happening with teachers, with students, with families across the community? And in those conversations, we had them identify the ingredients of that success. And that became the foundation from which the design process was created. And so when we moved from appreciative inquiry, we thought we'd highlight some of the quotes. And you can see in your packet what some quotes came out from the process from people within the community. What we also wanted to do was look at this human-centered design and how do we integrate that with the work of our fellows. And so we partnered with the Public Design Bureau, Liz Kramer and Anne Marie, who also come out of the Sam Fox School of Design at WashU, really helped to move us from this appreciative inquiry into creating this vision and prototypes that fellows went back in and tested in their schools, received feedback, and then created iterations of those prototypes. What's really critical also with this in this work is equity, and how is it continue to be at the center of the design process. And so we also partnered with Nicole Hudson, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor of DEI work at Washington University. And in that, she was able to guide us with these very important questions. Who's being served in this action? Who is left out? And how does this advance equity in the school? And these questions will remain centered to the work that we'll be doing in the fall as the fellows move from their design books and the designs that they've created into implementation over the next school year. The fellows did an incredible job over these last 6 months. What the ISP and Washington University are very excited about is to be able to walk alongside the fellows, each and every one within their schools, to help support their vision, keeping their community design inclusive and helping to move from design iteration and into implementation while supporting what feedback looks like when we're evolving prototypes. And so we're looking forward to the next couple of years and what the future holds for our fellows. I'm going to kick it back over to Isaac.
So there's a lot of data on the next slide, but again, one of the key points that I want to highlight for this, thank you, Nikki, is that each school identified a strategy that they're trying to pursue and then a prototype that they're trying to roll out. The idea being that there have already been instances where those schools have had bumps in the road and they've had to edit their prototypes, but without giving up the strategy. A lot of times, as you know, a school or the district will say, this is something that we want to try. When we hit a road bump, we don't know where to go next. And so this allows them to just take one step back instead of taking all the steps back. You'll see that Each one is unique to that school community. So Kelly Casper, hers is around student-centered classrooms and the responsive classroom framework. She's already received PD for her leadership team in that area this early this summer. George Washington Carver is focused on the house system, similar to the Hogwarts houses from Harry Potter, out of the Ron Clark School in Atlanta, which does that work. Word Element Career and Career Day mornings on Wednesday mornings twice a month. For Roosevelt, standards-based assessments, not in the areas that we currently already have CFAs, and they're working very closely with our assessment team and with our curriculum team in that area. For Shenandoah, addressing unfinished standards, and I'd like to highlight here, they already have a robust RTI program, we all do. What their teachers actually decided was that wasn't enough, and that wasn't actually sinking in. So they actually had to go in and do something the kids would actually engage with, and that's where they came up with project and play-based learning. For Vishan, actually 5 years ago, it started in its current iteration as a ninth grade academy and expanded out. So the idea is that Ms. Smith would actually recreate that feeling of a ninth grade academy for all students. And then finally for Pierre Leclerc Elementary School, multi-age non-graded classrooms, not just in reading, which we currently have, but in all areas. So we come before you tonight because you do have a few agenda items that are coming up. The first is a renewal of the MOU with WashU ISP. They've generously provided their services both this past year and next year in kind. In addition, we're accepting funds from Parsons Blewett for stipends for the executive coaches and for the fellows. You'll notice that the executive coach stipend is higher next year because it is for a full year instead of for 6 months. We have excellent school visits planned. Those were delayed because of the pandemic, but we are intending to implement them in the fall, and we've received a grant from the Lightest Single Candle Foundation to implement those. And finally, assistance from Jay Hartman, who's the executive director of the Consortium Partnership Network in planning and facilitation. And so you'll see that this is almost $500,000 of external support. The internal support for this has been in the individual implementation at the school level, and that's been through school level ESSER funds. Very quickly, we are looking to highlight 4 different outcome areas. The first is staff retention. We've already seen that actually. Several of the principal applicants who were not accepted are not in the positions for the fall. We are looking forward to the retention of our current fellows. We're looking at staff satisfaction and perception data as measured via the Panorama survey, enrollment over projection for these schools, and then improvement of average student grade level growth in reading and math. Finally, what we're doing in the fall to finish off this planning year, we are looking to do additional intersessions to actually implement those prototypes that I just shared, and then have the fellows reach fluency in this process of prototyping, which is what all great school leaders do anyway. For them to engage in these excellent school visits aligned to their school specific prototypes, for revised executive coaching that's also aligned to what they're trying to implement, continued one-to-one support, explicit time for cohort building and equity reflections. We are also looking to go much more deeply into distributed leadership. So some schools have already engaged their teacher leadership teams and advisory boards. Vashon has a strong advisory board. The changes for Shenandoah came from their teacher leadership team. And so, but that is something we're looking to actually do across all of the schools. And then finally, branding and storytelling. We do a lot of great things. This is one of them. And we need parents who are choosing these schools or might choose these schools to know what's happening in those schools. So that is the end of the presentation. I'd like to open it up for questions.
I want to say I did have an opportunity to see the presentation of this, and I thought that it was well put together. As I shared with Dr. Adams, I only had some concerns that we did not include community engagement in any of the processes, and I think that would actually help even the principals that supported this to understand the role that the community actually plays, especially helping to stabilize the school buildings within the community. So that was one of the things that I really kind of had a concern with. That was really the only thing. Everything else, I thought it was very strong and phenomenal what was being done. My question that I do have is, from what you're presenting to us, are you saying that this is to finish out the cohort that you have, or the intent is to go into another group of educators that you're working to do? Is this the first prototype and you're looking to do another one, or is this to just finish out what you've done with this particular group?
So thank you. To address your, to go back for a moment to the community piece, I think we hear you loud and clear. That's what we've seen with some schools like Vashon is they've engaged their community, their advisory board. They've seen a lot of success through that. And so we're looking to expand that to all the different schools. In terms of who this is, we are looking to finish out the first planning year with these 7 fellows. And then in December, January time period, we'll be looking to see how that ended up and make a decision about the following year, whether we'll do a second cohort in 2023.
I do have a question, please. To me, this almost sounds like a consortium partnership once again. And the community design to implementation, I didn't hear the involvement of Local 420 or the teachers union involved in all this planning and strategy. And then in the end, I heard advisory board for all schools. And it always seems to take away from the leadership from 801 and I would think that 801, with us having all these superintendents here, would be the ones who were developing and strategizing what's going on within our school district versus Washington University. And they put all this money, $500,000. And I don't think that they would put all this money into this program unless it was going to be beneficial to Washington University or other organizations that are being involved. And to, you said distributed leadership. I'm still trying to understand how St. Louis Public School leadership, I know these are our teachers, but you continue to take it away from the district. What is the problem with the development of SLPS developing its leadership for SLPS? And we always continue to have to have outside advisory groups like the one at Sumner. And now you're talking about how many ever advisory boards for all these other schools on here. To me, I mean, we just got rid of this consortium partnership because to me, there was a problem because as a board member, when you asked me to take a vote or vote for something, I want to understand what it is. And when I saw the paperwork for the consortium partnership, I was very alarmed. I understand that people are keep saying, or employees are saying, we want more freedom to develop our classrooms, or we want to make more of our own decisions. The same thing you're asking of these teachers, because as you were talking, I didn't want to look at that because I wanted to focus in on what you were saying. And all I hear is that you asked the teachers to analyze their classrooms and to identify all the various problems in the classroom. And then you were going to work on that instead of them giving those issues to Dr. Adams and our district working on that and working with the teachers to develop a stronger district policy versus Washington University taking over everything. I'm just finding it really hard to that, and I definitely won't be voting for it, but I'm sure everybody to each his own. But when you start talking about these advisory boards and all this money being placed with programs like this that take the power away from the district, outsourcing seems to continue to be a problem in this district. And I'm still just having a problem with why can't we have so many superintendents and associate superintendents. And when are they going to be able to turn this stuff around instead of bringing Washington University in and involving Local 420? We already have a teachers union. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pollack.
Thank you.
We now move on to the consent agenda. And as we've talked about before, it is a long one. There are 3 new items on there. So as our practice says, we will take them separate. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda or to take any items separately?
I'd like to take an item separately, please.
Which one?
Item number 06-14-22-87.
Okay. Any others? Board members want to take an item separately? Can get a motion to approve 6/14/2201 to 6/14/2286?
Can you tell us what these items are? Still numbers?
It's on the consent agenda
Yeah,
that was
but-
posted on board docs. There's 86 different items. Can we get a motion to approve that range?
Say the number again, Matt.
So it's 01 through 86.
I make a motion to approve consent agenda items 01 through 86.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Sonier, Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
motion passed.
I'll make a motion to approve 06/14/2287.
Second.
Discussion, Ms. Jones.
As stated before, I just really feel like this particular item is a continuation of the consortium partnership. And it's almost a mild form of going into charters. So I'm voting no, but that's just me.
Any further discussion?
I want to discuss because from what I gathered that this particular program was really offering support to the principals, not necessarily to take them out of the district, but actually to lean in and kind of get input from them and give them tools that they need to better serve the students that we have. Like I stated, the only concern that I had was that we were not going or leaning into the community as we should have, as they could have. But overall, what I got, the presentation, the feedback that I got from these particular principals, I saw that it was added support for what they were doing. If I'm not mistaken, 2 of the principals have now been elevated to other schools. And I think with the skill set that they've been able to bring from what they've learned from here is going to help them in their skill set when they go on to other St. Louis public schools.
Ms. Sonier, Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
No.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
motion passed.
Could I have a motion to approve 6/14/2288?
I move that we
I
approve.
think, I think that was approved at the last meeting, if I remember correctly.
Oh, the 2288, the mindful schools.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong-
I think you're looking at 89. Mr.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
I'm
it's,
sorry.
yes, I
Oh,
thought
well,
so.
we didn't, we only went up to 87.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
So you want a motion for 88 or 89?
Did we approve 88? That was for the uniforms. I think you're right.
I thought so.
I thought we approved that.
You're right. We did.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so I move that we approve 06-14-2289 on MOU with Mindful Schools for July 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
Second. Mrs. Hunter.
Ms. Sonier, Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Could we have a motion to approve 6/14/2290, which is to ratify and approve the acceptance of funds?
Actually, hold on. I'm sorry. I did have one clarifying question on 89. There is not an amount in there, and I just want to make sure that is not at any cost to the district. Is that correct?
If I recall, there was there's a lot on this agenda, but there was a supporting documentation on there. I don't remember if there was an amount, but there was a more thorough explanation of what that program was.
Yes, I can check for you if you want to hold it. It's okay. Since we have a work session, I can get you that information before the July 1st date.
No, I mean,
I just don't have the backup information in front of me.
yeah, it's just usually the amounts are on the
Right,
line
that
items
is correct.
themselves.
But I
so-
just want to double check. I don't want to being consistent. So if you don't mind us putting it at the work session, that would be fine.
So then
It would still
would I
meet the
need to
July.
rescind my motion to approve this item and instead postpone this until the next meeting, work session? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And then someone needs to rescind their second, either Tony or Matt,
I
whoever
think
it
we both
was.
did. I'll rescind my second.
Okay. I move to approve item 06-14-2290.
Second. And just to read this again, this is to ratify and approve the acceptance of funds from Parsons Blue Memorial Fund to partially cover the cost of the citywide plan for education for the period of May 25th, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. At our last meeting, we approved a contract with Health and Color Inc. And this is to reimburse some of that through Parsons Blue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the next item is as well for matching funds from the foundation.
That is 100% correct.
Any other discussion on that item? Mrs. Henry.
Ms. Sonier,
Abstain.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move that we approve 06-14-2291 to ratify and approve the acceptance of funds in the amount of $200,000 from the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation to partially cover the cost of the citywide plan for education.
Second.
Ms. Henry.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
We're now into board member reports. Our first board member report is regarding the MSBA policy revision project. So I will recognize Ms. Fowl.
I have 1% left on my phone, so hopefully there's something I need to look up. So just as an overview, kind of a recap, the governance committee started originally as the onboarding committee, I think in 2019, which was designed to help new board members get everything they needed to know. I have taken back over as the chair as it became the governance committee, and it was being run by Ms. Fowler. Right after I had my baby, she took over for me. And she had been working with the MSBA to look over our bylaws and our policies. So I spoke last week just to kind of get an update from MSBA with Kelly Hopkins and Janet Tilley of the MSBA regarding what's been done, what's still in the process, and what we need to talk about as a board moving forward. So Kelly Hopkins has reviewed our bylaws and given us some suggestions here and there, and some of them have actually already been changed from what was submitted to her, and we are waiting on administration and legal to get the updated versions, and we have, I think, a couple of new bylaws that have been added, so we're waiting on those to submit to them before we go over it in the governance committee and decide how to move forward. The other portion of it, which is going to be, I believe, up for a vote on our July consent agenda after we discuss tonight, is the policy revisions, which is a bit more of an in-depth process. So MSBA is looking at like about 9 to 12 months of completing that. And we're thinking that it would be best to take that in chunks of 2 to 5 policies at a time. And MSBA looks over it, brings it back to the governance committee. The governance committee brings it to the board, and then we vote on it bit by bit rather than just a whole massive set of policies. We can really dive more deeply into each one and whether it suits SLPS. So MSBA has cookie cutter policies that work for 99% of the districts in Missouri, but knowing that we are St. Louis, they are going to look over these things specifically to make sure that they work for our students, our teachers, our staff, our family. They're very good at this. And the quote that we were given was $50,000, and this being a year-long process and a lot of communications, that is a large chunk of money, but it is a very involved process. So I wanted to have a really good conversation with the board at a work session, maybe coming up or now if you want, whether we should proceed with this, if this is something that we should even put on the consent agenda for a vote. Because it is a big chunk of money. So does anybody have any questions so far? Because I have more.
I don't have any questions, but I think given the nature of where we are, especially with our policies, this is something that we definitely need to do. To my understanding, our policies are somewhat outdated
Some have been not updated since 1991.
and they do not necessarily pertain to where we are at this point. So I think that this is definitely something we should do.
I would definitely agree with that. Some have been revised as of like 2001. And then, like I said, we do have some that once the board regained governance and we were more reflective of the community who elected us, we have changed some of our bylaws. And I think, we're looking at policy changes upcoming as well, pending, semi-recent state legislation. So we're a completely new board and we're a new district. Things are different. There's been a pandemic, et cetera. So it's my recommendation that we go through and have MSBA do this rather than trying to do it ourselves, because at this point, reinventing the wheel is not as easy as having someone just put better tires on the one that we've got. So,
I just wanted to point out my favorite part of the MSBA proposal is that there are financial penalties involved if they send us changes and we don't respond within a time period. So I feel like they know how we work. So
yes, they
that
are
was
very
good.
familiar with us. And I don't have the exact amounts because my phone died. I can't pull up that email. But yeah, there are penalties involved. I mean, minor penalties if we don't, actually do this, because they're putting a lot of effort into it. And I will say that when we were going through the extensive governance trainings with MSBA, one of their requirements was that we have a quorum. And they're not going to come all the way and train us and do all this stuff for us if we are not committed to it ourselves. So I would really hope for full commitment from the board from this before we ask them to proceed with such a project. Right. So what they're going to be looking for in these policies as they review them is fluency and readability, compliance with the law and statutes, consistency between documents, like if there's something in our student handbook that's different in our staff handbook per a policy, they are going to bring all of that into alignment, and looking for dated language and content to make sure that we are, being reflective of modern terminology and the terminology that we've selected for ourselves. So their hope is to begin in January 2023, and it should take 9 to 12 months. Probably closer to 12 months, given the communication that will need to go back and forth between governance committee, the board, and MSBA. And we're going to take it piece by piece. Again, this is not up for a vote. It's really more of a report on the status and the situation. And I guess, do you want me to continue with governance committee report?
I just had one more thing about
Sure.
the policies. So as we've discussed before, and we've discussed with Dr. Adams, the bylaws portion are really more board heavily responsible. But when we get into all the other ones, it's going to be very staff dependent. And there was a breakdown that Dr. Adams had presented before about what our policies were and which staff are responsible. So, we'll be encouraging, obviously, the staff to take an active part in it. And hopefully the MSBA policies will make that easier than reinventing the wheel.
And Ms. Val, it is on the agenda for July to be approved.
Thank you. So the governance committee is reforming under Ms. Fowler stepping down under her leadership. We might be doing some reorganizing. So one thing that I spoke with Janet Tilley and Kelly Hopkins about is governance is something that is, it's almost like a living document, right? Because we have a rotating board. Boards are set up to be elected 2 to 3 members at a time, and we're never always the same body. So as Donna and I have been the ones that were on the board before we had governance, and we now have 2 vacancies, onboarding our new members and our current members and bringing them up to speed on that institutional knowledge is a huge job. And you all have not been through some of the growing pains that we've been through, and there have been a lot. So it is difficult for me to just say, oh, that one thing that we did, you shouldn't do it that way this time. Or for Donna to step in and say, oh, we should do minutes this way or that way. So I have asked Kelly to, and I'm hoping for a commitment from the board for regular training from the highlights of that governance training that we received. And we went through, I think it was 8 months, Donna, 9 months of training on nights and weekends before we were granted governance back. So that was one of the stipulations of DESE deciding to give us our governance back. So maybe this is monthly, maybe it's bi-monthly, but maybe a half-day session for you all to get the benefit of some of those more important trainings that Donna and I have gone through, so that we can bring everyone into the same kind of alignment of what it means to be a board member and how we act as board members, how we conduct ourselves within meetings and in the public. So it's really difficult, even with that essential board member training, when the only institutional knowledge left over is us two. And we're new at this too. We didn't get governance until 2019. So it's my hope that you all will consider some commitment to ongoing governance training and continuing to develop ourselves as leaders, just like we require of our staff. So that is that update, and we can talk more about that at an actual work session. We have some time for conversation.
I just wanted to, I did attend several events in the past couple of weeks. But I wanted to jump back real quick, and I'm not going to be long-winded with anything this evening, but I wanted to talk about the graduations. I attended 11 out of 12. And the reason why I did it is because I wanted to get a feel for our students. And I want to encourage our people who are listening and people who are here. And I want to thank so many of you for being there for our students. So many of our students are in need. And what I found out when I was at one of the graduations in particular, there was a young man that ran up to one of the staff, and he had a big wad of money in his hand, and he was begging the staff member to let him walk. He wanted to walk so bad, but I guess he had worked and saved all that money up, and it was so important to him because this was a very important moment in his life that he graduate, that he walk across the stage with the other kids in his classroom. But what I want to say is, there are a lot of events that are going to happen to our young people, and they might just need $5. They might just need a hug. They might just need a word of encouragement. And during this summer months right now, please, if you see somebody or a child in need, just give them a hand. If you can take an extra child to the zoo, or if you have an extra pair of shoes, or there's something else that they need, or a big hug or something like that, let's give it to them. Because I mean, that might mean the difference between life and death for many of them. Many of our students are out here, all they need is just a little help. And so many of us, sometimes we turn our head, let's not do that anymore, because our students need it at this time. The next thing is the school board training, the Missouri School Board training we attended in St. Charles, and I really appreciate all of my board members attending. It was very enlightening. We learned a lot, and there was a conversation about sub-districting and what had happened in St. Louis. But what I wanted to say is, a cross-section of this board, we all live in different parts of St. Louis, North St. Louis, South St. Louis, West St. Louis, whatever. And I think that we're on the right track when it comes to representing the people of this great city. The citywide planning committee, I also attended that. And what I came away with was how important it's going to be for us to really, really listen to our students' voices. I mean, the parents, I mean, the students, not just the students, but the parents, the staff, the grownups, they're always there at the table, but we always seem to kind of miss out on the student voice. And it's so important that we really listen to them. How can you make a plan for someone if you don't listen to what they have to say? I want to hear what they want in a school. I want to hear what kind of classes, what kind of teachers, what kind of environment that they want to exist in. And then I think we'll really have a winning recipe for a school district, which we really do have. We have grown-ups here that care and love our students, but when we really involve our students' voice, then I think it'll make all the difference in the world, because I don't think our students would be committing crimes and doing things that are crazy like we do when we're young if people were listening to what they really had to say. And so that concludes my report.
I did have one piece of business under committee reports that we do need to vote on. Last year, we approved an ad hoc legislative and advocacy committee under that document. It was to terminate at the end of the legislative session, and we were to vote on whether or not to create that as a permanent committee at the next regular meeting. That is this meeting. It also included a component that we had a report on the committee's actions, and we'll take the work session in Mr. Carroll's last when he addressed the board as the report of that committee. So I would like to make a motion to make the ad hoc committee a standing permanent committee of the board.
Second.
I was going to second, and I do have a question.
Please.
As you know, this has been something that I have really, really wanted for a long time. And I always tell you, Tony, you guys are doing a great job, but I appreciate the work you all are putting into it. I just want to make sure, do we need an actual bylaw for that? Because I believe when we did other committee creations with the budget committee, have we already crafted a bylaw for that?
So yes, so the ad
Okay.
hoc document is not to change other than to just become a permanent committee. And that's
Okay.
how it was written. And it was
Okay.
based off the budget committee formulation.
So would the motion need to be to amend the bylaws to include the governance committee as the legislative committee as a standing committee? Mr. St. Omer, I guess maybe that's a question
So
for
your
you.
question is, so I think my motion was to make the ad hoc committee a permanent committee.
Mhm.
And you are saying that I should make. a
I'm not
motion
saying,
to
I'm just
amend-
asking, do we need to make a motion to amend the bylaws to include that? Since that's what we have done in the past. So in the past, when we've had committees created, the budget committee and the governance committee, and I think there was something else. I just want to make sure that we have had to change the bylaw to include, or add a bylaw, I think. And I just want to make sure that we're doing that correctly.
That's not my recollection, but I believe you, the motion as formulated by Mr. Davis should be sufficient.
Okay, perfect.
If it turns out we're wrong, I'll come back and ask to fix it.
Okay, well, I want us to have a committee
No, I-
and I want to make sure we do it right. So,
I looked at it over again, and the way we wrote it was anticipation of it becoming a committee. And I think that was kind of the same way that the budget committee was. And then we do have, and this is something that we need to address, tweak in the bylaws, a bylaw about ad hoc and permanent committees. And there is a line in there about them becoming permanent committees and the requirements. But we wrote the ad hoc to conform with the permanent committee in anticipation that if we liked it, we'd just do it this way.
Gotcha, thanks.
Any other discussion? Ms. Henry?
Ms. Sonia,
Yes.
Ms. Pfau,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Any other committee reports before we continue on with board member reports?
I do have a committee report. Ms. Donna actually kind of covered a lot of what we've been doing. We did have a citywide summit summit for the champions. And we did hear loud and clear in regards to what Ms. Jones is saying. And part of what we will be doing with that process is ensuring that we're bringing youth in to participate. There are some things that we're bringing in as well in regards to the youth, hopefully that we've talked about, where they will actually be a part of doing a documentary of the process that we're working on. So we are listening, and like Ms. Jones says, that this is definitely a board that genuinely cares about the kids, the district, the community as a whole, as well as the administration that's actually working with our youth. So hopefully there will be more to come, or I know there'll be more to come, so just stay tuned. And thank you, Ms. Jones, as always, for being a soldier, being there all day with us that day.
So as a part of the new committee formation, I'm over the budget committee, but I have like a lot of questions about kind of like the direction we want to go in, what we want to see, what it used to be. So just, I guess my report is just like maybe expect an email from me, especially Donna and Natalie, about like what it was and what its original intent was. And obviously the others on like what we would like it to be moving forward. My idea is, I know that in a previous meeting, we talked about coming up with an idea for should the proposition be successful, how we'll go about updating our buildings and schools and that type of thing. So maybe using the budget committee as a place for that, but just expect some reach out about that. And then my only individual report is like, we went to the Great Ideas Summit that Donna mentioned. It was great. I got to learn a lot. I always love meeting all the different school board members across the state. And then also hearing that some of them have been on school boards longer than I've been alive. Like, yeah, like I just love seeing the passion. And also I would commend all of you all on just, I think in a lot of the meetings, what we talked about afterwards was a lot of what was new information to a lot of the other board members. Even though I've only been here for a year, I was very well versed in, very much familiar in. They were conversations that we've had before. Yeah, that's my report.
I only have one more activity to report on. Ms. Cousins and I went to a professional learning committee on June 4th on a Saturday at University City. That is a group of school boards from the metro region, mostly St. Louis County, well, Region 7. So it's the DESI Region 7. So that also included, there was some, at least one Jefferson County school board as well. It was a great networking opportunity to talk to other school boards that we don't often do out in the county. The focus of this one was their legislative report, and it was given by the director of Education Plus, who represents us all in that organization. And one of the takeaways from that meeting that afternoon is there were several county districts who were interested in forming a legislative sort of group focused on legislation going into the next session among St. Louis County. So I reached out to them, said we're happy to, join in on that. I feel like, yeah, well, so they kind of looked at what Education Plus was doing for like their boards, looking at it, and it didn't always necessarily trickle down to all the individual school boards. And we talked a lot about what we did. And so we're gonna, to build that coalition out into St. Louis County, because we do believe that, education will be a hot topic again next year. And there's a lot of commonalities that we share, particularly in North County school districts that have populations similar to ours that, don't really have a voice in some of these things. And so getting everybody together, talking about our common issues, I think would be a powerful thing. So that was another Saturday well spent. I have one final report, and that is to say congratulations to our camera person, Mr. Tom Booth, who it's my understanding this is his last meeting as a full-time employee. He is retiring after 2 decades. We'd have a highlight reel of your work, but we'd have to ask you to do that for us. So so maybe we'll have that again. But the good thing is we're going to see you maybe even more, because you're still going to be working part-time and assisting us in the meeting. So we thought we'd give you a couple challenges to overcome tonight on your last night, just for fun. So congratulations, sir. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. And with that, if there's no other comments from the board, that brings us to public comment. I'll give everyone the normal caveats that comments are limited to 3 minutes. We did want to point out one request that we have. If you do have handouts for the board, please leave them at the podium or hand them to a staff member. It will save time rather than passing them out. And Ms. Henry or another staff member will distribute those to us. Our first speaker is Mr. Charles Murphy for 3 minutes.
That's the one. That's the one.
That's the one. Okay, got it.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate y'all being here, and I appreciate being here. Only thing I really want to do tonight is say thanks. Last meeting, I've been to a bunch of meetings in my life, and last meeting, something happened that has never happened before. Public comments happened, and we spoke and raised different issues. And then an amazing thing happened. Y'all responded. Y'all responded in real time that night. In the past, we've always had to wait and hope we'd get an email or something would come out and be published. But one thing I want to thank Tom personally.
This is my night.
It's his night. Tom has always been there to believe in us, especially when we brought the students down, me and Mr. Pulley. You know, we updated the studio up there, thanks to Dr. Adams. We've been through a lot of things in this district. And at one point, we realized that studio is an extension of our classroom. And he helped make that happen, along with Dr. Roach, you know, the chief of staff for a while there. So I'm here basically to say thanks and also to speak on behalf of our students' voices. Donna was in the sit-in in 2007 when the students, a group of us sat in from a Wednesday to Sunday down at the mayor's office. And we formed OVTV, Our Voices Television. And that was really the concept behind the studio. And that's a dream, but I'm a person who's here because I dream a lot and I dream with our students. And Tom always made that dream a reality. So thanks, Tom, and to be continued.
Ms. Michaela Gray. Okay. Mr. Monroe.
I have 7 handouts.
Give them the best kind of way.
I've been here quite a while. I'll take a few more minutes. There you go. Those handouts that I gave you, this is the second handout with the same request. And it has to do with Beaumont High School and Banneker. Please accept this handout regarding my proposal, which I had submitted to Dr. Adams and the board on several different occasions with no response. The only response I got after the handout was from you, Matt, when you gave me a rebuke or some type of letter of warning about what you expected in these meetings. But you responded to that in several days. I have not got a response with this proposal. I asked you, Mr. Davis, to direct Mr. Adams to meet and work with the Harriet Tubman organization to make this proposal happen. We have a bank behind us, Midwest Center Bank, or Kimbrough, Midwest Center Bank, on Dr. King and Bill. We have a bank that's actually waiting on the St. Louis Public Schools to make a decision about some vacant buildings, Beaumont and Banneker. And we've not gotten any response, Matt Davis. Our children are going hungry. Our children are going to jails. Our children are dying and being killed in the streets. And we need to take some of these vacant properties and make something happen that will benefit our community. There's money separate from whatever monies you have here. There's monies that this Board of Aldermen and their problems that they're having, waiting for a decision. And we have you've had several proposals from us for making this thing happen. I don't know how long you're gonna make us wait. You didn't make me wait on that letter that you gave me about this incident we had up here at public comment. You got it within several days. but this is the first warning letter that I've gotten from people like yourself. But I ask this board to see what's going on in our streets. We can take vacant school properties and we got the money to rehab them. We can take Banneker, a vacant property, and make it a girls' dormitory. What are you waiting on, Matt? What are you waiting on? And I want to say this. You mentioned a bond proposal. I'm saying no to it until this community comes to the table proactively. The citywide planning, we were left out of it. I say no to it until you sit down with those of us in the community and talk to us about the needs of our community. No to the bond.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Irma Nevels McNeil.
Okay, good evening. I'm Irma Nevels McNeil, and I'm with the Missouri Retired Teachers Association. And I am concerned about retired St. Louis Public School employees, all of them. And so I've been retired myself since 2005, 17 years, but I've been working with the pension board before I retired. In 2003, I started looking at the what was going on with the retirement. And so, but I've never received a cost of increase of living. And I was wondering who was responsible for doing this. And so, but I know this in 2017, which I passed out to you, just some of the clips of the Senate Bill number 62, which it changed St. Louis public schools system. It changed the policy with the retirement system. And so I would direct you to the attention where I have marked number 102, that line. I found out that the trustees from the pension board can give a cost of living adjustment. But the only problem is this: the fund has to be 100% funded, which is almost impossible. But what's kind of like a paradigm, when it was 80% funded, before they changed legislation, it had to be 80% funded, but we still never received a cost of living adjustment. So it's like the members, the retired employees, we're not receiving anything. And so it's like, it makes us feel not very nice, because we love our school district, but we don't feel like they love us as we should. So that 100% is on the second page. And then I have another page where the American Federation, Local 420 has written a letter to the school board here and also to the trustees, asking that we receive a $1,000, like some kind of reimbursement that would help us, let us know that you do care. Because really you need us and we need you, because we know that you got all these employees, we're all retired. And so we are all knowledgeable in every area that can be. So I think it would be very, very wise and very good for our students, for the school district, that we all work together as one. So I'm asking you to make us feel good. So, and so give us something, because I mean, pretty soon I'm gonna be too old to get anything. So that's all I got to say. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Belma Bailey.
Pardon me, I have some handouts. And this one is for the president. Thank you. Thank you. Do I start?
Press the button.
Good evening. My name is Velma Bailey, and I'm very happy to be here to talk to you about something that I have a great passion about. It's the children who live in our city, the children who attend the St. Louis Public Schools. I am presenting you today with a magazine, and I've turned it to a page that I'd like for you to focus your attention on this evening. And it highlights some of the information and the accomplishments that a not-for-profit that I founded in 2012 has gained on behalf of the children and our community. And I was glad to hear you talk about public and community input, because we definitely have made strides in this community to help children have an opportunity to create the paradigm that they want to live instead of accepting one that someone else has created for them for their destruction. So for the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to volunteer and organize an after-school program, a 10-week summer day camp now from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And we take our children on 20 field trips. We have speakers that come in, and one of our highlights is a 7-year relationship that we've developed with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, where our children now are being in relationship with the police for 1 whole week. And you kind of know how those guys are. They started out with 1 day, kind of taking the kids on a field trip to the internal affairs. And now they're doing a full week of summer camping within our camp for our children, including the bike giveaway that the children get, closing down our park and giving our children an opportunity to ride one-on-one in our park with a buddy officer, whether they can ride or whether it's a learn to ride experience. And those relationships for our children, the police officers in our community have meant the world. So I would like to share with you, this is a magazine, Be the Change. And I know St. Louis Public Schools wants to be the change that they want to see in this community. It's a brand new magazine. It's about everyday people like me. People who are retired, people who do basically small things that make a big difference in this city. And you talk about working with parents, we're in session 50 days. So we have 100 contacts in 50 days with parents that attend our, have children in our camp. I volunteer there so we can keep our camp at no cost services to our children. For parents who work not minimum wage jobs, but hourly jobs, and they have 2 or 3 of those jobs, we're able to provide them with justice in our community where they have a safe, supervised place to live their children. We provide an opportunity to gather these children together so the region can be responsible for their children. We have come here many times before we even started this camp and come to the school district and asked them to support us. And we've got nothing. I submitted a proposal, MOU, and I've got no response to receive. I was told to talk to people. I went for an hour and answered questions of interrogation about what we do. Nobody has responded to me, and that's been 2 years. And I would also like to say that at this point, I would ask the board to please redirect the funds that are being spent at Yateman School. You're spending $75,000 in partnership with the St. Louis City, and there are no children at that summer camp. They've been in session since June 2nd, and they're having $75,000. We'd like for you to redirect it to our camp.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. That concludes our agenda for this evening. So if we have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Hunter.
Yes.
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 Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
We are adjourned.